In this lesson, you're going to be learning how we subtract fractions with like or common denominators. And remember, when you see that pencil down in the corner, that means that it is your job to be taking down the notes that you will need to help you do the check at the end of this lesson. Alright, so let's do a quick vocabulary review of what you've already learned. Numerators and denominators. Well, when we have fractions, we know that the denominator is the bottom part of the fraction. The numerator is the top part of the fraction. We can think about that like the denominator tells us how many parts there are in the whole, and the numerator tells us how many parts we actually have out of that whole. A mixed number is a whole number and a fraction put together, like maybe 1 and 1/2. And then to simplify or reduce means that you're getting the smallest form of the number that you can. Alright, so like what we talked about before, a denominator is the bottom number in the fraction. This can be referred to as the total number of parts that you have in a whole. So take this fraction right here, 5/16. Well, if our denominator is 16, we have to think about how many parts are in our whole. The denominator is 16, so that means there are 16 parts in our whole. The numerator is 5, which tells us that we have 5 out of those whole 16 parts. This is going to be really important for you to remember when you're subtracting fractions, just like it was when you were adding fractions, because there are different things that you have to do when you have common denominators, which are the same, and different denominators, which are different. Alright, so we're going to start out using some models. Using models is a great way to help you visualize their fractions when you're subtracting them. So in this area model right here, we're looking here, and we can see that in the box, it is divided into 8 parts. Our fraction that we're looking at right here is 6/8. That's how many we have. So you can see that the area model is shaded in 6 parts. That's how many we have. Now we need to subtract 2/8. So if I'm looking at my model right here, I can cross out 2 of those 6 fractions that we have. And then we just count the shaded boxes that we have left. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So our answer is 4/8. It's pretty easy. Alright, so we're looking at our area model here right now, and this area model is broken into 4 parts. So we know that the fraction that goes along with this area model is going to have a 4 in the denominator, because remember, our denominator tells us how many parts we have in the whole, and we can see right from this area model that we have 4 parts already. So I want you right now to pause the video, take a second, and just draw this area model on your notes. Make sure you have the 4 sections. Alright, so you have paused the video, you drew your area model. I'm going to give you a problem, and we are going to go through it together. Alright, so our problem is 3/4 minus 1/4 equals blank. So make sure you write down that problem. Alright, so our next step is that we have to shade our area model. So if we are looking at our first number right here, 3/4, we know that we have 3 parts out of all 4 of those little blocks that we have. So go ahead and shade 3 of those blocks. Now, we are subtracting, or we're taking away 1 of those 4 parts. So we are going to cross out 1 of those parts. So your area model should be shaded. We cross that out. So if we're looking at it right now, we have 3/4 minus 1/4. We're looking at how many parts we have left. We have 2 of those 4 parts left over. All right, so now we've learned about simplifying fractions and reducing that number so that it's the smallest possible number that we could make. So we're going to talk a little bit later in the video, but I just wanted to point out that this fraction right here, 2/4, can be simplified to something even smaller. So if I'm thinking about what the smallest factor would be that I could bring these two numbers to, well, that would be 2. So I know that I can simplify 4 into 2, and I know that I can simplify this into 1. So if I'm dividing by 2, so 4 divided by 2 is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So 1/2 is the smallest possible way I could make this number. Alright, so in just a minute here, I'm going to ask you to follow along with me and to draw this model. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a box. Alright, so you're drawing your box with me. And you're going to divide it into 2 equal parts from left to right. So I'm cutting it right down the middle. I'm going to add 3 vertical lines, meaning up and down, equal distances from one another, right in the middle here. And my finished box should be in 8 equal parts. Alright, so let's check to see if we have 8 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Alright, perfect. Your box should look just like this in your notes. Alright, so using your picture, remember I have my box here, you are going to shade in 6 of those squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright, so just take a second, think about what would this fraction be. Write it on your paper. Alright, if you guessed that this would be 6/8, you were correct. Now it says cross out 3 of the shaded squares, alright? 1, 2, 3. So take another minute, just figure out what is the fraction of the ones that we took away. If you guessed 3/8, you were correct. So right now we have 6/8 minus 3/8. Alright, so now all we have to do is just count how many we have left over. 1, 2, 3. And so we know that 6/8 minus 3/8 is 3/8. Now you might be wondering, well, I knew that 6/8 minus 3/8 was 3/8. I didn't really need the model for that. Well, the model is to help you visualize it, but ultimately we want to get you to the place where you can subtract it without the model. So for the next problem, we are not going to use a model, and we're going to see if you still know how to subtract. Alright, so we have 3/7 minus 2/7. I'm looking at my denominators. That's the first thing I always need to do. And I need to figure out, do I have equal parts to the whole? Well, I can see that my denominator here is 7 and my denominator here is 7. So that means I have 7 equal parts. I can just subtract straight across the numerators. If I have 3 parts and I take away 2 parts, 3 minus 2 is 1. So out of the 7 whole parts, I had 3. I took away 2. I have 1/7 left over. Pretty easy, even without the model, right? Alright, so our next step now is we're thinking about mixed numbers. And we know that we can subtract with mixed numbers as well. Well, let's start with the model to see if the model still works, even when we're using mixed numbers. I have this picture here. And this picture is showing me a number, and I believe it's a mixed number. We have to figure out what the mixed number is, though. So first of all, I'm going to look at my squares. I can tell that these 2 squares right here, this one and this one, are both shaded in completely. So that means it has to be a whole number. So if I have 2 holes right here, 1, 2, I'm going to look at my last one. That one's not shaded completely. It's divided in half. And then this whole section right here is shaded. So that means I have 1 out of the 2 parts. So I have 2 holes and 1/2. Well, what if I wanted to subtract 1 whole and 1/2. Well, let's think about it. I'm looking at my models here, right? I have 2 wholes and I have 1/2. Well, if I wanted to take away 1 whole and 1/2, how much do I have left over? Well, I didn't have this part to begin with because that wasn't shaded. Now that leaves me with only this. This is 1 whole. So 2 and 1/2 minus 1 and 1/2 gives us 1 whole. It works just the same with mixed numbers. Now, subtracting with mixed numbers, especially when they have the same denominator, becomes really easy because you don't have to do any of the work. You don't have to convert or change them into anything else to subtract. Let me show you what I mean. Right here I have 6 and 4/10 minus 3 and 3/10. Even though there's whole numbers in there, my first step is always to look at the denominators. If I have like denominators, this is going to be a piece of cake. I do have like denominators here. They both have 10 parts. So all I have to do is figure out how many of the parts do I need to subtract. Well, let's look at the fractions first. I have 4/10 and 3/10. I have the same parts, so I know that my denominator is still going to be a 10. And now I just have to look at my numerators. 4 minus 3. Well, 4 minus 3 is 1. So I know that the fraction part, 4/10 minus 3/10 equals 1/10. Well, now all I have to do is look at my whole numbers. 6 minus 3. Well, 6 minus 3 is 3. So I know that 6 and 4/10 minus 3 and 3/10 gives me an answer of 3 and 1/10. Pretty easy. Alright, so we're keeping in mind that we always have to reduce or simplify our answers. So even if we're subtracting with mixed numbers, we still have to remember that we have to simplify. So I want you to pause the video right now, solve this problem, don't simplify it yet, just figure out what the answer would be. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video and you solved the problem and you said, okay, 3/4 minus 1/4, they have the same parts. I know that that denominator is going to be 4. 3 minus 1 is 2. That's pretty easy. And I'm looking at my whole numbers here. 4 minus 2. Well, 4 minus 2 is 2. So I have 2 and 2/4 as my answer. That is perfectly correct. Now, I'm looking here at my fraction. 2/4. Is that the smallest version of that number that we could get? Of course not. We can simplify that number. So let's do that step next. Okay, so we have 2/4 here and we're going to simplify this number. So we have to think about what is the lowest common factor that these two numbers have that we could divide to make this fraction smaller. Well, hopefully you were taking notes because we did this earlier in the video. I'm thinking, what can I divide 2 and 4 by to get smaller numbers? Well, 4 divided by 2 gives me 2, and 2 divided by 2 gives me 1. So I'm looking at my number here, 1/2. Can I make that any smaller? Can I divide this by any smaller numbers? Nope, that's it. So 2/4 can be simplified to 1/2. Alright, my mathletes, it is now time to go show what you learned. Go to Canvas and take your quiz for the lesson on subtracting with like denominators. Please make sure you're clicking on the right check to go with this video. If you don't feel like you're ready to take that check yet, go ahead and watch this video over again and then look through your notes. Good luck, and I hope you do well.